Welcome back, week 4 MCP session. So today we are going to explore like what is this MCP and how we are going to implement the MCP solutions into the project or like for the requirements. Before we talk about MCP, let's talk about the traditional problem we have. Okay, so what kind of a problem this MCP is solving it? Okay, so in very how so far, like, okay, I don't want to call it as a olden days, I would say that, okay, but until today, for example, this MCP has been introduced. So the way we develop an application, is a bit of, bit different. Let's see, like, okay, with example, okay, what exactly it is. Let's imagine that we want to develop an application, okay? So we want to develop an application which provide some kind of a services. Let's take a college information or a student information system. Okay, so let's assume that there is an university. There's an university, and this university is providing a students information system for their students. So what they did is like they developed a service. So the service is or in like for example an API. Okay, so they are providing an API services for the university to for the students. So they have a database contains like the students information. They have a students information. So and now this university has provided an API, for example, like authentication. Okay, and for example, like okay, student details, student marks, for example. Okay, and also like okay, student transaction details, like for example, how much I mean fees he paid or for something like that. Like this, they provided like a couple of APIs here. Okay, now they asked like they asked like the public or like any external vendors who can develop in a mobile app based upon the APIs these guys are providing. Okay, these guys are providing. Now let's assume that like there is a vendor one, for example, and the vendor two. Okay, vendors are like who develops the mobile apps. So they're consuming these APIs and then they're developing an application, mobile application. Similar way, there might be another vendor who also develop a different kind of a mobile application. Okay, so which again consumes the same set of APIs, for example. Okay, so now what happens is like, okay, this has been, the application what we developed here has been, communicating all these APIs to fetch the data. And the same thing, the V2 is also using all the APIs to get the data from these APIs and then consuming. So for example, let's assume that this authentication is there. So because the authentication is there, so probably these guys are using Aadhaar, for example. Okay, we already know that like okay, there is an Aadhaar. So they are taking a Aadhaar as a authentication methodology inside this one. So they have an API. Okay, for the they have a code for the database, which each of the API will fetch a different kind of a tables from the database and then providing a information to the app so that like app will display those information back, and same thing to the for the vendor too. So this is how the current application and the current applications are developed. Generally this part, like for example the APIs, what we call it as a generally like a Swagger, they provide Swagger document. In this Swagger document, they provide all the related APIs. For example, if you are not, is anybody don't know about Swagger? Just raise your hand. If everybody knows, then I will just skip this topic and then go to the next. Okay, so there are some people who doesn't know about the Swagger. Okay, I will not take much time. Okay, for example, okay, this is a pet store. Pet store, for example, in this case, like as our university, okay, the pet store is another business solution like like university. So there is a pet store. So these pet store, what they do is they provide a Swagger document which contains the APIs, so that like anybody who want to have a mobile application for pet store to show the pets, what pets they are selling. Okay, I mean, like, okay, what is the age of those pets details. Okay, so how many pets are available, for example, how many dogs are available, how many cats are available. Okay, if app want to develop such kind of if a vendor want to develop such kind of an application, so they use these APIs, for example, for the pet store, and then they will make a mobile application, or it can be a desktop application. Okay, so like this. Okay, so there are like these Swagger APIs are consumed by these vendors, and then they develop an application. Now imagine that, like as like there are like they have to know about how the APIs are designed. Okay, how the APIs are designed, and what kind of a parameters we need to send. Let's say, for example, if I want to add a new pet to the store. Okay, so if I want to add a new pet to the store, okay, then there is a lot of information. Okay, so which need to be sent to the API, so that like the pet is created in the store. For example, like it should have a name. Okay, okay, it should have a category. Okay, for example, like animal, for example, and it should have a name, and also the pet picture. Okay, and like some tags related to that to the pet. Okay, for example, like sick, for example, or like okay, maybe it has having some kind of a black spots, for example. Okay, so like this, maybe there might be a many tags. So we have to send all this payload to this API to create a pet. Like this, it means that when the vendor is developing this particular app, or something like that, you should know aware of like what is the each API doing and what kind of a parameters need to be sent, for example. Okay, so when have this kind of information, like from vendor or vendor two, or everybody should have the same kind of knowledge to develop some app based upon these APIs. Now imagine that, like, okay, so now I don't know what it is. Okay, I don't know what it is. There is a black box. Okay, there is a black box, and this black box doesn't tell you anything to you. Okay, anything to you, but it will only give a one request. Like we have like many here. Okay, but it will give only one request, and any app, for example, for any app, you can just develop your code. You don't need to worry about it. You just send what you want to do. Okay, you just send what you want to do. Then this black box will decide which API it should use. Okay, this black box will decide which API to use, and then it will do the stuff and then return back like, okay, so what you're expecting, for example. Okay, then in that case, like what happens is now we have only a single black box kind of a solution, where like vendors can easily communicate with like one-to-one onto that black box, not like as a request for each and every API. Okay, so this kind of an implementation is possible with the MCP. So from traditional like the current way of developing the application, okay, to the more like a context-based request will be sent, so that like, okay, that particular action will be created. Another case, let's say, for example, when you are having an API, for example, like student details. So behind the code, generally, when there is a database, so you should know what table, okay, we need to use, and what kind of a columns we need to use in this table. And then backend, we write a query, okay, saying that like, okay, select this, where this ID, where student ID equal to this, and then fetch that record, and then formulate that record to a understandable or like readable format. Okay, and then send that information back to the vendor application. Then the vendor application will understand this particular information, the standard information, and then formulate it in a way like you want it. Okay, but here what you're writing is the query. Like that, for every kind of an API, you might be having a query with the joins, a query direct queries, or like filterings, or like multi-level querying. Okay, so like this, you will be having like a lot of code will be written. Imagine that. Okay, now you don't write anything. No, you don't write any for example, a query. Okay, you just tell to this black box, here is the database. Okay, here is the database, and here are the tables. Okay, and then just give information about what this table contains, for example. Okay, then when the question comes, for example, okay, so this black box knows how to create the query, what query, like, okay, this particular question required, and then fetch that information, and then send it back to the vendor in a format like which he is looking for. So imagine that, like, how much complexity of application development, either like in the vendor side, or from the the service side, will decrease when this kind of a solution is available. So that is also possible with the MCP. Okay, so this is like what we are going to talk about in today's session. So we'll see how it is, like what it is, and how to implement this solution. So I'm taking like two examples here in this session. So one is just to make you to understand. I have one demo which provide in a scattered way. Okay, another one is more like a more like organized way. Okay, so now let's jump into the session. Okay, and then let's try to understand what this MCP is all about. Okay, so that's a more like what this MCP is going to provide a solution for us in the next couple of moments. Yeah, so basically this is a MCP stands for like a model context protocol. Basically after the chat GPT has been released, and this is one of the hottest topic, like the AI has been discussed. So in this one, like the model context. So basically, so far, like we are talking about when we talk about like communication, we talk about like HTTP communication, or like WebSockets, or like this kind of a communication we're talking. On that one, we are talking about like a HTTP kind, or like a GCP kind, okay, gRPC kind, okay. So this kind of a communications formats we are talking about when we talk about client and server things. But here, this is more like we got a models like LLM models or something like this. Okay, so now like, I mean, they want to like, okay, create a standardized way how we can utilize these models, so that like we can get the achieved goal there. For example, the goal we want to get it. So this Anthropic has been introduced this model context protocol. So currently, okay, this is one of the very good concept of like providing the solution. I think like there are many people, for example, even open source. Okay, so the Linux is also want to come up with a standardized solution. So they're also working on the standardization solution. But right now, what we are discussing about today is more about Anthropic, MCP standardization. You remember, like in our first exercise, we talked about this guy who want to fly to Helsinki with his wife and two kids. So he approached the AI, okay, and then like he asked the question to the AI, like, okay, yeah, can you book that one? Then the AI, for example, agent here, okay, trying to communicate with various providers here, for example, car services, bookings, flight, hotel, okay, so location, like this, the agent is communicating with various providers, okay, providing this kind of a details about him, and then trying to book the solution. So this is one of the good example of like the MCP here. So for agent, okay, it can be, for example, like, okay, so when the MCP is being written, or like, okay, it's ready to work, we can use that MCP as a tool. We discussed about that already. So like a machine learning, like for example, RAG, okay, we can also use the MCP as an agent. So think about like as a, for example, USB-C port. So for example, when you have an USB-C port, So that USB-C port doesn't care about what kind of a what kind of a device you are attaching to that one. You're maybe connecting a monitor, you are connecting a memory disk, like okay, anything like okay, which supports that USB. You connect that one, okay, then it will work accordingly. Okay, so to tell this MCP, so I mean like this is a very generic way of telling it, like okay, think like as an USB-C port. So you connect whatever you want, like okay, all it has to be support that one. So if it supports to the USB-C, that's it. Like okay, that device will work accordingly. If you connect to the monitor, then you will get a display on that one. If you connect a USB-C, then you will access the files. Disk, for example, you will get access to those files. So entirely two different things, but the port is same. Okay, so we can do that one, and it also solves this end-to-end integration problem. Okay, so as I mentioned, so what is meant by this end-to-end integration problem here is like again like like again this is the one. So for example, if you see this is N and this is M here. Okay, so n number of applications trying to m number of APIs. Okay, so it will create a lot of mess. It will create a lot of mess. Now this problem has been removed by using this MCP. So where you have only one standardized way of communicating to the required thing. Okay, so that is what like end-to-end problem means here. So reducing the complexity to the most simplest way possible here. So that is the problem, like it is going to solve it. For example, here I'm trying to provide a very high level picture, okay, of like what is the MCP means. Believe me, like MCP is just you need to understand it. Otherwise, it's a very simple procedure. Like okay, it is very what do you say that like not that it's not that complex. It's a very simple thing. But all we have to understand is traditional way or like the current way of how they are developing it, okay, how this is going to answer by solving this end-to-end problem. Okay, so there's only concept you have to understand. Otherwise, this concept is very simple to understand. Okay, and also like very easy to implement as well. Okay, so all we have to understand is like okay, how the data is flowing. Okay, that is the most important thing in this concept. Okay, here you see that there is a the picture. For example, like we have a MCP host, and there is a like for example like MCP. I mean like a host which can integrate to the MCP server. So here the MCP servers are, for example, the rental company, car rental company. They provide an MCP server. Like the same way the Booking.com, for example, booking services. Okay, yeah, minute.
Yeah, Surendra, one quick question. So when
Mhm.
you mention this MCP host,
Mhm.
does it refer to a client? So MCP client or something?
MCP.
Client.
Uh,
So the host, what does it mean?
okay,
Because
yeah,
is
no,
it a
the
client?
MCP host is not MCP client.
Okay.
Okay, MCP host is which the MCP host contains an MCP client, just
Mhm.
not an MCP client. Okay, MCP
Okay.
host contains an MCP client.
Mhm.
Okay, that MCP client will interact with the MCP server.
Okay.
For example, here you see that like okay, here we have a rent and booking,
Mhm.
right? Okay, rent and booking. This is if this is an MCP server, then there should be a the one which consumes the provided information of this particular rental service. Okay, along with the booking as well.
Mhm.
Okay, and then when these two information is there on top, the host will be driving that what where to go what.
Mm.
So it means
Okay.
that MCP host also contains the MCP client.
Mm. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So for example, like here, if you see that rent, booking, and all like as an individual items here, for example, that you can correlate with for example, like rent is something like a local file storage, and the booking is something like external APIs apps. Okay, like flight booking, like a remote database. Okay, it can be anything. Each will contains an MCP server. So the MCP server will be provided by the one who is providing the service. Here is the rental service. and you configure all those things to the MCP host. Okay, MCP host, so that like MCP client will be communicating with this MCP server and then getting all the information. Okay, then when this if this is a agent is in a host, you send a question to that one. The inside there are many clients which are created for respective servers, and then communicating with them and bringing all the information and doing the job what we required. Okay, so this is a like very high level representation of what is the MCP MCP is all about. Okay, so I hope like you understand a very high level view about like what it is now. Please ask me if you have some question before we jump into the next one.
So the host is basically it's a group of clients, and of course it acts as an orchestrator, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So when we say that like the standardized way, okay, so we talked about like a standardized way. So I try to provide a very simple representation of what it is. For example, like the on the left hand side we have a traditional way of how we communicate with the servers and then get the information. And on the right side, like we talk about like a more standardized way. For example, so in that one, let's say we have a client server application, so where we are providing a Swagger APIs, for example, the APIs, and then that APIs will having a logic of retrieving the data from the database and then serving it. So when we use that particular REST APIs, let's assume that like okay, so we need to send a request. For example, here what we're sending is okay some information for with the arguments like name and age. So maybe like assume that this is a post request where we are creating a person which required name and the age for that purpose, for example. Okay. So now when we are sending this API, so you see that name equal to John and age equal to 30. That is what the API is expecting from the Swagger. Okay. So when you send that request, it works very good, okay, without problem, and then it will return some for example HTTP code like 200 or 201, for example. Okay, and then it will says that yeah, okay, successfully created a person named John, for example. But if you call the same API, for example, in the second example, like f name equal to John, like for example f name equal to John and age equal to 30. So then immediately the Swagger API will throw an error to you saying that like okay, for example, it cannot create particular record. The reason here is, anybody can guess other than Bennett? The reason is the API is expecting the arguments name equal to John, name equal to some value, age equal to some value. But in the second API, we changed the variable name to f name. It's not name, it's not name anymore, it's f name. Okay, because API doesn't know about this variable f name. Okay, that's why it will reject it. Okay, that's why it will reject it, and then you have to correct that variable name to name before you send it again. Okay, so that is the current way of the applications or like the APIs work. But now you see the bit of a standardized way. So once we implement an MCP, okay, so now you send my full name is John and I am 30 years old. Okay, it's a good, I mean, like the MCP will respond saying that, okay, yeah, I created your record now. Okay, so with this, you're like, okay, with your name, John, and 30, I mean, your age is 30, like, okay, I created your name there into the records, for example. Now we change that one. I am John, born in 1990. Okay, so still you'll get a good response here, even though you change it completely a different format. Okay, so now like the MCP will take care of this information, and then it will calculate like okay, you born in 1990. Okay, now like based upon the current year and all this stuff, it will make that like oh, his age is 30 and his name is John. Okay, so now it will make a communication with the respective MCP server. Okay, and then it will create the record and it will send back. So It doesn't matter like how you send the information to the MCP. Okay, it will do the job like what we want when we compare to the traditional or the current way of doing it. Okay, so it just as like I have written on the down, like okay, so the REST APIs all expects predefined parameters, like okay, this is the only way like you have to send. Otherwise, like the REST APIs will fail. In contract, like the MCP, so you send a context, okay, context in a standardized or more like model agnostic way. So the AI model or service can use it regardless of how the underlying API or a model was originally designed. Okay, so that is how like the MCP standardization will help them to solve like many problems like what we are seeing in nowadays. For example, I just shows the same example like as I mentioned earlier. So we have here, so we have like various applications, and assume that like there are some various API services provided, for example, GitHub or Post database or some external APIs or Jira. Okay, so when this one want to develop an application, okay, let's assume that you go and for example, like okay, let's say check the latest code in the GitHub, okay, and then create ticket based upon that one, for example. Then when if you want to develop such a kind of a functionality in this app one, for example, first you have to call to that GitHub API, get the latest one, understand it, okay, take the required things, and then call the Jira API again, okay, and then put all those details what you got it from the GitHub, and then create a Jira ticket for that purpose. So it means that like we are making a 2 to 3 calls to complete that functionality. But here in the other side, once you implement an MCP, okay, so you just tell that like, okay, you do that, okay, then the MCP will take care of it, and it knows based upon the context, it knows whom to call first. Okay, whom to call first and what need to be done after. But in this here, the code, you can't call first Jira and then go to the GitHub. You always has to go to the GitHub first for that particular use case, and then go to the Jira. Okay, but here, I mean, like we are not telling in any order, or we are not writing any code here. We are just telling that, okay, so here are my APIs. This APIs do this kind of a things. Each API do this kind of a things, and then like the MCP will know based upon the question. It knows that first I need to call GitHub, and then I have to take this information, and then I have to send that information to the Jira. Okay, that is what the MCP do here. Interesting, right? Okay, so how it works. So overall, like how this MCP works when you look at more into the internally. Okay, so here, for example, like again on the right hand side, like okay, left hand side, I provide a very simple API, for example. So there is an users, and you send a name and the age, and then the database, the API will send that information to the database, and then respond back with the desired output for that API. Okay, but on the right hand side, it's more like an MCP thing, MCP related. So, for example, there is an user who want to have want to create a record, for example. So, what he sent is a context. That context contains, for example, a create username, user John, born in 1990, for example. Okay, now you see like, okay, when you send it, before even like you're sending it, the MCP host, when you bring the MCP host, for example, up, so the very first thing what it will do is like it will try to get the available tools from the each MCP server it was been configured. Okay, for example, you see the numbers there, 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, so this is the order we are going now. So when you bring the MCP host up, first what it will do is it will go and take all the information from the MCP server. So the MCP server's responsibility is to provide a list of tools available from his side to the MCP host. Okay, then like once it is available, then the user can ask, hey, do this one with a context. So once the MCP host receives that context, so what it will do is it will communicate to the language model. There is a place again where we are going to talk about, like, okay, look, use the Gemini. In the previous session, we used Gemini API. Once the vector in the RAG, once the vector has been given to us all the information, and then we are sending that information, okay, to the LLM with the question we have, and then the LLM is deciding, like, what need to be filtered, and then formulating it and then giving that back to us. So that is what we saw that in the RAG. And also Bennett and myself also, we discussed during our session. Okay, so what happens, like, if you give a small length of small length for example, and then it doesn't have that information. Okay, so and then, like we discussed about, okay, in the real implementation, we go first to the LLM, and then try to create a vector which can really match to the what exactly, I mean, it is expecting for something like that we discussed yesterday. So here is little bit connected to that one. Connected to that one. So now when the context is received, first, that context, the MC, once it receives the context, it will send that user context along with the tools, okay, along with the tools to the LLM. Now, LLM, what it do is, by looking into that context and the tool information, it will decide, okay, what tool to use and what kind of a payload it has to send. Okay, so now MCP will receive that information and then send. Okay, and then, like, because it knows about the tool name, a tool can be anything. Okay, as a API is also a tool here. Okay, so it knows the tool and it knows the payload of that one as well. Now it will call that API. Okay, it will call that API from the MCP server. Okay, and then the MCP server will know about, like, okay, so the MCP server has received the tool name and what is the payload it has to use. Okay, so now MCP server have the information about this tool and underlying API for that one, and he also got the payload. Now it will call the respective API. Okay, and then whatever the API is responded, that information will be again passed to the MCP host. So now MCP host has received a formatted, maybe a JSON format, or like in some format, XML format or JSON format or any format, for example, for that matter. Okay, so once it receives that information to the MCP host, so again this MCP host send this context and the API response back to the LLM. Hey, I received this one. Okay, then LLM knows that, like, okay, how to formulate this based upon the context. So LLM create a response related to that one and then send it back to the MCP host. Now MCP host return that back whatever the things like LLM has created to the user. So this is the flow of, like, how the in an MCP internally, how the things happen in the MCP. Okay, so though it look like a bit complex or like, okay, something or interesting, okay, but it's easy actually. Okay, so I mean, like, it's not that difficult. Now imagine that, like, okay, there are many MCP servers. Okay, so it happens the same way. Even if there is more MCP servers, it will send all the tools of all the MCP servers, and then it will identify based upon the context to identify which MCP server it has to call. Okay, so as part of the performance, having too many MCP servers is also a problem. So when the people are developing it, like, okay, so they have to be very careful about, like, how many MCP servers we are configuring there. Okay, so yeah, and okay, yeah, so tools and okay. Now another thing is, let's assume that in the yes, Bennett.
Yeah, Surendra, sorry, a dumb question.
Yeah, no.
So this MCP server, right? So are these external ones, or is it like something that we develop as part of the, like, the MCP, or is it like external ones, like completely managed, or it's like an external one that we just connect to?
Yeah, for example, this a GitHub is there, right?
Yeah.
GitHub will provide a MCP server.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, we are not developing any MCP servers per se, but rather we just refer them as MCP servers. For
Uh,
example, like external providers like GitHub or Jira or
no,
whatever.
yes and no. Okay,
Oh.
yes and no. Okay. For example, we are university. For example,
Mm-hmm.
you got the university who are providing a APIs.
Mm.
That means that we've developed the MCP server.
Oh, yeah. Of
Whoever
course. If I am
whoever is
providing the
providing a service,
information. Yeah. Mm.
whoever is providing a service,
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
those
But
persons have to provide the
okay.
MCP server as well.
Okay. So, but then like what we are doing, like say in MCP is the MCP host part basically, right? That's what we are implementing.
We implement both MCP server and MCP
Okay.
host as well. Depend upon like what we are doing.
Okay. So if we are using only consuming external services,
Ah,
then of course we are using only the host. And
yes.
of course, if we are providing a service, then of course we are
Yeah,
generating an
exactly.
MCP
Exactly.
server. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So that are clear.
Okay, so in this example, like we discussed about, like this guy want to create some Jira ticket, okay, and that the Jira ticket is depending upon the some GitHub commit message or something like that, for example. Okay, so in that case, we discussed about like, okay, he can't call the Jira, he can't create a Jira first and then go to the Git commit. So he has to go to the Git commit, GitHub commit, and then take that information and then call the Jira API. So it has to go in the order fashion. Okay, and we also discussed about like in MCP, you mentioned like what you want, so it will decide, okay, in the order it has to go. So it knows that first it has to go to the GitHub and then go to the Jira. So exactly, okay, here the same thing. So when you send a user context and the tools information, then the LLM will respond back, all the list of things what it has to do. Okay, so first you do this one, do this one, do this one, do this one, do this one. Okay, and then this MCP host will accordingly call the MCP server and take all the information received. Okay, to and forth. Okay, to and forth, and then it's going to get the back all the information to the LLM finally, and then give the response. Okay, so in this example, we are not doing that iterative mode here, but we're just trying to do like with only the one MCP server. Okay, so when we come to the agent, so probably we will try to do one example of related to that one. But right now in this exercise, okay, so we are not doing that multi-iteration thing. Okay, so yeah, just for your information. But how it has been, I mean, where it has been decided how to call like which one has which APIs need to be called will be decided at this point. Okay, so when this MCP implementation has been implemented, for example, okay, so as I mentioned in the previous slide, so when the MCP host has been started, the very first thing like what it has to know is the tools. The MCP server has to provide the all the tools what it can facilitate. For example, like, okay, so this information has to be given to the MCP host. That is called the tool list. This is very important. Okay, so these tool lists need to be provided. So when the MCP server is being developed, so the tool list will be documented in such a way that it is a standardized way again. Like, okay, so where they mention that, okay, you use this format. For example, Anthropic, when they're standardizing it, okay, so they tell that like, okay, use this format. Have provided a very one snapshot of like how the tool need to be defined, the tool list. It has a name like unique identifier for the tool. Okay, for example, here get stock price, for example, and then it is having a title where like human readable name for displaying purpose. Okay, so what is this tool is for? Like a stock price retrieval tool, for example. And you also provide a description. Okay, this is like for human and as well for the LLM. Okay, so this is very important one. Okay, this has like as I said in the last session. Okay, so what is that like? What is that prompt engineering we discussed about? Okay, so the prompt engineering is the one like where the prompt engineers will come to this level. So they will define what this tool, okay, how this tool has to behave. Okay, all the limitations if they can, okay, they should be able to do that one. And then the input schema tells that like, okay, what this tool will take. For example, it takes the symbol of type string of like it is a stock ticker symbol, and the date, okay, and the date is the string of a date format, okay, like that it has to mention all this information. Okay, and the output schema. So once like once we get the information, so how the output need to be formulated. Okay, so like this, they mention each and every details in a very standardized format. Okay, and then like this information will be sent to the host. Now, host will send this information to the LLM based upon the context. Okay, it will send all the information to the LLM, and then LLM will read this information and understand it. Okay, so yeah, what is this tool, which tool need to be called, in which order it has to call, okay, how this payload need to be designed. Okay, like this the LLM will decide everything and then send it back, that particular information back to the back to the host, so that like host will do the rest of the job. Okay, so this is how like the tool list will be identified. Okay, so any question here before we jump into the demo? We will see like how it works. Yeah, Bennett.
Yeah, yes, Surendra. So now for that, for example, this tool list example that you have given here, it's like very kind of comparable to an API definition, right?
Exactly.
So specific API definition,
Yes.
and I would assume that this is for one operation, like get stock price or something, and then like
it's an array of things. Okay, here
array,
we
it's
define only
pretty much
one,
an
but
array.
it's an array of these things.
Okay, so pretty much if, for example, the external service has this Swagger definition or Open API specifications, then that could be used for generating this kind of tool list, this kind of list. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Any more questions? So here we have a Wk4. So for this one to work, you need again like Gemini API, API information. Okay, okay. So to use this one, so here I have provided the code. Let's we go through one by one. We also have this README document. Okay, so how to run this? Okay. Here is a very like, I mean, I just made like kind of a draft MCP. Okay, in the first example to debug and to look into in a very simple way. Okay, so when we implement a full solution, so it will be more organized and more like efficient way. But the second example is a much better solution than this one. Okay, so we will go into that, and then we'll also check that. Okay, so in this one, like we have an MCP server, and then we have an MCP host. So what this MCP server is provided some features, okay, some functionalities for that one. So now let's first check into the MCP server. MCP server. Okay. So MCP server. So as I mentioned that like the MCP server's responsibility is to provide a list of tools it offers. So here we have given a simple two tools. Okay, one is get weather, and then the other one is the calculator. Okay, we have given a two tools here. Okay, so what is this one is like a description. Okay, what it will do is like get a weather for a location, and the input schema is okay, location as a string. Okay, and it is required. And the calculator, what we are given here is just it will calculate a math expression. Okay, so and it also it takes an expression as a string. For example, 2 plus 3 or 5 plus 6. Okay, 5 into 4. Okay, something like that. Any expression, it will take it as that, and then it will do the calculation on that expression. So there are two different tools this particular server is providing. Okay, and look at the definitions of the code here. So what it is doing is this code, it just only taking the location. Okay, and then it is responding back whether in this location is 72 degrees Fahrenheit sunny. Okay, nothing else like, okay, so it's a very static response back. You can write whatever the code you want here, but okay, the main point here is what is this get weather is taking as an input, and what the output it is sending. It is only just taking a location, like for example, India, then it will respond back whether in India is set to degrees Fahrenheit sunny. If you provide like America or like if you provide okay, so anything like location if you provide, so it just respond back with as a 70 degrees Fahrenheit sunny. Okay, that is what this particular definition is been doing. Next is the calculator. So calculator is taking an expression and then it using eval function of the Python. Okay, so if you provide any eval, for example, 5 star 6, for example, like okay, so then it will do the calculation. If you divide 5 by 6, it will do the calculation. So it takes any expression and then return back the result as a as a return to this particular definition. Okay, so any before we go, any question on this definition? Somebody's having some question? Hope everybody understand this one. It's a very simple code. We are not doing anything great here. Okay, our interest is not about what it will produce, but we are interested about like how that method will be there. Okay, so that like our more interesting thing is a question, how this it will call these particular things and then come back. Okay, so if there is no question on that one, now I'll go. Now we have a root. Okay, now we created a root. Okay, this root is a very bad root. I would say that one, as I mentioned, that this is only for the demo purpose. I want to bring everything into one, one file about all it can provide for the simplest, like less number of files. So what it will do is it just take a request. Okay, it just take a request and then it takes the method. Okay, so what method like, okay, they are going to call. And then if that method matches with this thing, okay, so for example, if the server asks that, okay, give me the list of tools, okay, then it will give the list of tools. Okay, so here we created okay, so okay, it just created the tools. Okay, it will just give the list of these tools, nothing else. Okay, and then if method is like yeah, now call with some information that contains the params name and arguments. Okay, so it will call it will make a call with this method, for example, and then if that particular contains a get weather. Okay, so MCP host has sent the call with get weather, then this will respond back with the weather. Okay, with this thing, like it will respond back with the the payload. If it is a calculator, then it will respond back with that one. Okay, that is what like this will do. Okay, so any question here? So you are clear, right? It's a very simple. You just take the what it is calling. If it is calling for list tools, so it will send the tools information. Okay, if it is having a with param name and arguments, then it will call respect to get weather respect to calculator with the arguments it has received. Okay, so it has received. Okay, and then it will take the location and then expression, for example, and then it will send it back the respect to response. So as simple as it is, we are not doing any complex here. Okay, and it is running on 8080 port. Now let's look into the MCP host. Okay, so the MCP host, again, as I said that in the picture, the MCP host is communicating with the LLM. That's why we have this okay, so Gemini API key here, and it is running on 8080. I will move this one to here so that like if for some reference, if you want to use, we can use this one. Okay, here we have creating an MCP client. Okay, because it has to call these tools and this information need to be there. Okay, to be identified. Okay, so that particular information will be identified using this MCP client. For example, if you look at this MCP client, okay, so in this MCP client, what we are doing it here is, so we are having a call definition and list tools to definition and call to definition. So if it is a list tool, okay, we are telling that, okay, use this method. We are just giving information. Okay, if this is the tool, okay, you just provide that one. If it is asked for the list tools, you call this method to the MCP host server. Okay, sorry, MCP server, so that like you will get a list. If it is a call, for example, okay, call tool, okay, then you provide, this is the method it has to use with name and arguments. That is exactly, we are doing it here. Okay, if the host has called with this method, okay, then this is the things you extract from there. How do the host knows that, like, this is the method it has to call? It is coming from this client. Okay, it is taking the information from this client, okay, by having this import, okay, and then it is formulating it. Let's see how it going. So we know that, like, okay, this is the key we have to use, and then we are creating an MCP client. Okay, MCP client, this is the client. Okay, and then here we are taking the okay, so before we define this one, we are taking this client. Okay, and then when we are defining the host, we are defining the MCP client as well. This is the client, and that client is being to the self. Okay, so I mean, I don't need to explain the code here to everyone because most of you know about this Python. Then the very first thing is like we are loading the tools. So to load the tools, what we are doing is from this client, we are calling the list tools. Okay, list tools. So the list tools is this one. So this is the method we are sending back here. Okay, in case like if you don't find anything from that one, then we are saying that okay, send empty. Okay, if this success, if you send empty one, then like we don't get any results. That's why like we should have a tools for sure. So when this method is being called, what we are going to get it is from the MCP server, the list of tools what we have there. Okay, now like we implemented a little bit dynamic way of finding that information. Okay, so where we are calling this Gemini AI provided tool information, and then we are trying to get all the tools related to that one. Okay, so when this model is being initiated, so we are using this particular call to get all the tools. Okay, to get all the tools related to that particular HTTP MCP server to make these tools available for this model. That's what in the picture like we discussed. When you start a like an MCP host, okay, something, okay, first it has to get all the tools. So that is the operation we are doing it here. Okay, I'm not going through like each line by line, but understand this. When you start the host, so it has to build a model with the LLM that required a tools. So it will get all the tools, okay, and then prepare the model for that to serve. So that is what this particular thing is doing. So if you just go to the Gemini API and look for, like what exactly this means, you can find the definitions in the document. But the action what we do is collecting all the tools related, ready, preparing the model ready with those tools. And then we have another definition here is chart. Okay, chart means like now the model is ready. Okay, the model is ready with all the tools. Now you have to send that information. Okay, send that information to the for example, like send the information. We have all the tools ready. We have the model ready. Now you send the context. The user has to send the context. Okay, and that context, how the process will go. For example, okay, where we are now is at line 3. Okay, so maybe like what I will do is, yeah, I'll put this one. I will try to explain where we are here at this moment. Okay, now the tools when we are developing a model, we got the tools. Okay, and then we send those tools and prepare the model ready. Now we are at the line 3. Okay, we are at the line 3. I mean step 3. Step 3 is this one. In step 3, we are sending a message. For example, here in this case, create user John born in 1990. Okay, for example, that is the user message we are receiving here. Okay, then the model like what we have developed here. For example, Okay, start chat. So we are chatting with Gemini API now. Okay, and then send a message to the chat with this particular, information. Now we are at step 4. Okay, we are inputting to the LLM. Okay, the output of this one is LLM and the API payloads. Okay, the response what we get from this one is because it knows about all the information, because it is already know about the context, it knows about the tools. Okay, now we are sending the question as well, the context, it knows about the tools. Based upon that model which has learned about these tools, as responding back with the required API and the payload. Okay, now we are, as I said that like it will send a sequence of steps. You remember I told you, it send a sequence of steps in case like if required to call multiple. Okay, but here in this case, I'm just taking only one. That's why like we have a part 0. So we are taking only one of this question and then, trying to call that one. Okay, now here is again like a dynamic, because we don't know what API it is going to call. Okay, so I just added a, converting that functions, for example. Okay, converting that function, converting that method, whatever the tool it has identified, into a function, and then calling that function with those arguments. Okay, here like, call MCP tool with API and payload. Okay, so now we are calling this client call tool. So this call tool function is this one. Okay, this one with this information. So we are sending that with the tool name, the LLM which is identified, and the arguments which LLM has given to us. Okay, and then like when you call that tool, okay, when you call that particular tool, you get a result. Okay, so you get a result, and then like that results will be captured, and then you take that result, whatever the result it has provided, again send to the LLM with the context and the result. Okay, now again the LLM will formulate that particular information and send it back to us with the required answer. Okay, that is like, part.text. Text is like something, the part is a very big object. Okay, but here like I'm only interested on how that is have been formatted. So I just using the part.text. Okay, it's a big object is this one. So you can look into what other things it is having, but I'm only interested on the main answer. So that is what I'm sending back. Okay, then this chart call will respond back with the LLM formulated answer to the user. Okay, now let's check this one. Okay, let's check this one. So the user will call chart, and that we calling the chart with the messages, and we got the response, and then we are responding back with the message. Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, Surendra. So the thing is, so this MCP, you're running this MCP server in a specific port, and also the host is running the same port. Is that the case? It should be different, right?
It should be different. So for example, we are running 8081 this one, and here we are doing 8080.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Right. Can you also go to this host? Yeah, just that one. Yes. And where is this the previous function, where it is exactly getting called? If you go up, maybe a bit. Yeah, this function, the chat function, where it is getting called.
Which one?
This chat function, that the def chat is there, right? Yeah. Where it is getting called. Okay. Oh, okay.
So this is the root.
Okay, so when we go to that, yeah, okay, send the request to this API endpoint, then it's okay. The chat is called. Okay, thanks, got it.
Anyone is having some question?
Surendra, one quick question follow up. So, for example, now in this case, we are creating our own MCP server. Yeah, and it's a very kind of simple thing. But suppose say if you're using an external one, and if there is some kind of authentication involved, which is typically the case, how would it go? Or will it we will talk about it later, or how is that?
No, I mean, the authentication part is not been implemented in this one. Okay.
I know,
So,
I understand,
yeah.
but I mean, like how would it be kind of a thing? So,
Yeah, it comes from the basically like, for example, like, let me, okay. So when when we are implementing a solution, okay. So generally case here is, so now we are talking, okay, now we talk about MCP host and all that, okay. So now we talk about from the user point of view, okay. So where did the user sending a question? Okay, so where this guy is sending the question? So what are the possibilities we have? Okay, you have your own web UI. Okay, you have your own web UI where the user is sending a questions.
Yes.
Okay, so to log in into this web UI, you require an authentication. Okay, so only authenticated users can send a questions. Okay, so the authentication will be developed here.
Yeah.
Okay, next option. You can send the messages using Teams, for example. You have Microsoft Teams, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the authentication will provided by the Microsoft to logging into the Teams. Okay, so once that is being done, so you can send a message, and these Teams can be integrated with the MCP servers or like host, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, so the authentication happens here. Okay, so or like for example, any flags in Slack or Teams Slack, everything works in the same way. Now here the MCP host, for example, okay, MCP host need to connect to GitHub.
Yes.
Okay, GitHub. So what do we have here? Like, when the MCP host is being, called, so the MCP host will provide a configuration file for you to configure their servers. Okay, in that configuration file, they will ask you to put the token for the GitHub.
Okay.
That authentication for the Git.
Okay.
Okay.
So
like
usually the authorization tokens and everything would be part of the MCP host. So it should know because it is basically acting as a client.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so this MCP server, when you're configuring this MCP server, so they will provide you the object. What are the things they need to fill?
Okay. And
So
I'm just wondering, should it be part of the tools list or not? The authentication part? No need.
No need.
Okay. Okay. So the configuration handles that authentication part, and the tools list is just for the actual business logic.
Yeah. For example, if the tool required authorization, like base 64, for example. Okay. So the MCP host knows about okay, it required an authorization of base 64. Okay, and then this configuration file for the MCP server will contain this information. That is will be filled.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Suren.
Anyone is having some question? Okay, good. Now let's look into this in action. So right now what we have here is only 3 files. One is MCP client, which is just a class providing the what are the methods we have to call. Okay, so we have like tools/list, tools.call is there. Okay, so that information will be provided by the MCP client class. Okay, and then we have the host, which integrates with the LLM. Okay, and as well as the calls the MCP server, and then exchange that information back and forth to with the LLM. And MCP server is the one which actually have the tools needed for the to respond, or like API calls to respond. Okay, this is a very normal procedure. Now we try to run these things accordingly, and then we try to see that like, okay, what happens. So we send a request to this particular MCP server host without without having a knowledge of LLM. Okay, so we don't talk about HCP host, or we don't talk about the LLM. How this server itself is respond back in a traditional way. So that is what we did in the week 1 as well. When we're talking about API, okay, remember when we're talking about the API in the week 1, we just created a first API, okay, and then which contains a call. For example, if you don't remember, I will just open this one. So we have a first API, we have a route, and then you send that information to the particular route, okay, and then route will respond back. We have exactly the same implementation here. We are not have anything fancy or anything new here. We have exactly the same information. Now we also send the request to only the MCP server, okay, without even assuming that like we have this host or like LLM integration. First level, we do that one. Second level, we take it to the MCP host, okay, and then see that like, okay, how that particular manual thing, what we did, okay, has become the like as a context. Let's start with this one. Okay, so what this document says to us is, okay, let me bring the terminal here. In terminal 1, okay, so you run the MCP server, okay. So this is for me like, I'm running as an MCP server here, okay. Okay, now the MCP server is running here. So this is serving at 8080. Okay, so it's a normal like, the API what we have. So now let's test that MCP server alone. We are not running any of these ones here. Okay, we are just running the MCP server. Okay, so now we have a test call here. Okay, not this one. Okay, not even this one. Okay, so yeah, this one. Okay, so we are just calling. Okay, maybe like I will add one more test file here. Okay, for example, like get tools list of HTTP. Okay, so now I just take the information here, so to make it easy for me. Okay, and then you remove this. Okay, and then you put the content type. Okay, and then you send the payload. Okay, so what I'm doing it here is I just call the I'm just calling this MCP server with a simple payload asking for the list of the tools it is having. Okay, so now the tools has responded back with all the tools it is having, just like the API call we did in the week 1, or like in the week 2, or like in the week 3. So we just call the API and then it responded back. Okay, now one API we tested from HTTP server. Okay, so we tested this one. So it just called the tools information what we have here, and then the same response we got it in this one. Nothing fancy. Okay. Now let's call the API again with some kind of a functionality. Okay, so now I take this one as for call method .htp. Okay, so in this one I'm just using again like this example here. Yeah, so what I'm doing here is I'm just calling this method myself. Okay, I know like what my Swagger file is. Okay, how it need to be called. Okay, so the method is tools call, and the parameters for me is name, get weather, argument is okay location, and Seattle. I know this because the Swagger file has provided all this information to me, what kind of a payloads I have to use. Okay, that's why I'm using this particular, payload, and then I'm just calling this one. Now, when we call this, so it will go to that one. It will check that whether its method is tools list. No. So then it will go to this one. If is the tools method is tools call. Yes. Okay. Then it have a params. Okay. Yes, it's having a params. Okay, and it is having a name. Okay, so yes, it's having a name, params get name, and then arguments, params get arguments, okay, the arguments what we are having here, okay. So it extract all those information from this particular payload, okay, and then if the name is get weather, because here the name is get weather, then it will take that argument location to this one because it knows the argument. That's what it do, nothing else. Okay, now let's run this request. Okay, you see that we got a response back. Weather in Seattle is 72 degrees sunny. Fahrenheit sunny. Okay, this is a traditional method what we are doing, and we are using the same APIs. Nothing has been changed. Now we use this with the MCP host and then see like okay how it turns. So far, any questions on this one? Hope you understand this one. We are not doing anything complex here. We just have an API. We call with the methods. We know what is the Swagger. We call them. Any question here before we move to the next?
Yeah, Surendra, just one curious question. So,
yeah,
for example, I noticed that you're using running a Flask application. So why is it so? Can't we just run an API app or
yeah,
something?
you can use anything.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can use anything. Yeah. Okay. Fast API you can use. Okay. No, you can use anything. Okay. Yeah. Any question? Okay, fine. Okay, so nobody has raised the hands. Now we are done with the first one. Okay, now we go to the terminal 2 and then like, we try to run this MCP host. Okay, so yeah. Okay, this is our terminal. Okay, I already, exported I already added the Gemini API key. Okay, so I already added a Gemini API key which required. Okay, so here, for example, okay, I already added it and now I'm running the host. Okay, now I'm running the host. One more thing you see here, for example, okay. So when I send that request through this HTTP, okay, this one, okay, this one. So just to see that whether I call that method or not, so I put a debugging statement. Okay, what call I made with what argument. Okay, now we have this MCP host running on this port. Okay, now we use the MCP host, not 8081 right now. Like, okay, what we called is 8080. Okay, now what we are going to do is not this port. We are not going to call directly the server. Now we are going to use the host. Host is MCP host is running at 8081. Okay, 8081. So now we have a test call. Okay, or like, okay, maybe, okay, this one is the normal one. Okay, yeah, this is the test call. Okay, now what we are going to do is we are sending the a context to 8081 chart. So now let's go to the host one. Okay, now we don't need this. Okay, and we also don't need this, just to make the space. Okay, we don't need, we know already what is this HTTP server. Okay, we know this one. Okay, we already discussed about this MCP client. We don't need. Okay, now we are interested only on the MCP host. Okay, and this one is not needed. Okay, yeah, this is the test call. Okay, so yeah, now what we are doing here is we are calling the MCP host with /chart. So when the MCP host starts on the 8081 port, it is having a route /chart. Okay, it takes the post argument. Okay, and then it is having a message. That message is this one. Okay, what is the weather in Tokyo? Okay, that message, like, now we send that host.chart. Okay, the MCP client what we created there, host.chart, and then we send that message. Okay, now that message will be delivered to this place. Okay, and then it will try to use the LLM and then try to negotiate with all the tools, because we already have the model ready with the tools like we are providing. Okay, so and then it will send the context. When it send the context, like it has to call the MCP server, so that we expect that the debugging statement should come there, and then it will respond back as we discussed, and then the response will be sent back to the client. So that is what like we are doing. So when you call this chart, so this is the part we are playing now. Okay, now let's see what happens. Hopefully it will work. Okay, so now send a request. So now when you okay, so okay, I don't know what happened. It's paused. Okay, let's see. I'll send the question again. Okay, it's waiting. Okay, now the weather in Tokyo is currently, okay, this is the one. Okay, now if you look at the debugging statement, you see that like we ran twice. So it called the right tool and the location. So the LLM has identified from this question, the LLM has identified what is the location, okay, and what kind of a tool it has to call from this one. And then it's prepared the context and then send that context to that method. That's why that method was able to identified, and then the location has been identified. Okay, so now let's we test the other tool as well. The other second tool we have is the expression. Okay, for example, I'll send a question like, I have 2 bananas and 3 apples. How many fruits? Okay. So now I'm sending because I want to test that another tool which is available, that is like a calculator. Okay, so I'm just sending like the question. Let's see how this LLM will deal with this one. Okay, so right now you see it here. So last method we call is weather. I mean like the weather tool, weather call, and the the argument is Tokyo. Okay, now we try to call and see what happens. Now we are sending the request to the LLM. Okay, you have 5 fruits. Okay, so now if you look at here, so calculating the expression, and it has sent the arguments is like expression as 2 plus 3. Okay, so it identified, it called the tool calculator, and then it is showing the what kind of an arguments it has sent, that is 2 plus 3. That's why like the response we got it, and the LLM has added this you have and this one with that number. Okay, how many fruits I have? For example, like okay, I also add like how many fruits I have and whether in India. Man, I'm just adding it. I don't know whether it works or not, but let's see. Okay, let's see like whether it can do the job. Okay, so it could not able to. Okay, so it got confused because it has a like multi-parts thing like which you need to be care. Okay, I just want to see that like okay how it works. Okay, so yeah, now you understood like so how this particular the message has been gone to through the this MCP host communicating with the LLM, and then identifying the arguments or the tools and the arguments, calling the MCP server with the required tools and arguments, getting the response back, communicating back with the LLM, and then formulating the text back to us, and then showing this the final response. Okay, so yeah, this is about like in a very very like raw way of explaining the MCP and overall. Next demo is more little bit sophisticated than this one. Okay, so if you understand this one, then it is also easy for you to understand the other one as well. Okay, before we jump into that, okay, if you have some question related to how the data is moving here, okay, so please ask. Otherwise, like I will jump to the next demo. Fine. So nobody's having any question. Good. Now let's jump into the next demo. So, okay, now I'm closing this window. I don't need this one because I have the other one there. Okay, so this is not needed until otherwise if there is something back needed. So I'll bring the other demo here. Okay. So this is like, we have it, this repo is there already publicly available, which under my name. Okay. And also I shared that in the WhatsApp group as well. Okay. But also share this one in the Discord as well. But okay, let's check this one, what exactly these do. Okay. Yeah. So this is a like an MCP chatbot. Okay, so which demonstrate like how business users can explore data in a Northwind database. For example, okay, we are a Northwind company and we have our own database, and we need to provide a chart services based upon the data we have in our database. Okay, so this tool includes like few features for the demonstration purpose. You can extend this code base to add more tools as needed. Okay, and I also explained like how to run this one. So again, this required a two terminals. And this is running this terminal. I mean, this is running on the server side, and this is running on the okay. The both are running on the server side. Okay, so one is provide a web UI interface for charting purpose. Okay, actually, I made a small change this morning. Okay, so let me okay. Okay, so I made a small change. So I added this node version and okay, this one as well. Okay, so now in the terminal one, so what it required is two parameters. So what kind of a model you want to use and the API related to that model. Okay, and here is like another terminal which provide a web user interface. Now let's look into the database. As I mentioned that we are using a Northwind database. This Northwind database is having a SQLite 3. Okay. So this SQLite 3, if you are aware of SQLite 3 already, it's okay. Otherwise, like we will just go through that that SQLite 3 as well. Okay. So and then we explore what it contains actually. Okay. So this is one tool to explore the SQLite. Okay. So open database. Then go to my data. No, not my data. I think it is. Is it okay? Let me first go to the. Okay, I will stop this one. Okay, directory. Okay, yeah, the one. Okay, we don't need this one. Okay, so now I'm in this one, which is having this MCP chartbot. So it is under download temp MCP chartbot access. Okay, download. Downloads. Where is this temp directory? Yeah, temp directory and then MCP chartbot, and then we have the DB, and then this is the Northwind database. Okay, so yeah. So here we have the database which is running on SQLite 3, and it is having like various tables. Okay, okay. So and then we have the products here. Okay, and then let's view this browse data. Okay, so take the products. Okay, so it is having the products contains product ID, product name, and other information here. Okay, so and then like we also have the customers. Okay, we have also the customers and the customer information, like okay, customer ID and all this information as well here. Okay, this is what the database contains. Now with this MCP demo, we are going to interact with this database, and we are providing a chart services for our customers. Like where they can interact and then find the information required. These customers, again, like, okay, we don't talk about any security or anything else. We try to, the more we're talking about is what is the use cases we can solve with the MCP. Okay, so now I will move this one window to some other place for the time being. Okay, so so that like it will not be obstacle for us. Okay, now we need two terminals again here. Okay, so done. I will take okay, so this one and this one. On the top, I need to export this key, which I already did before, but in her like and also I need to export the model as well. Okay, so for example, uh, so which I exported just now, model as well, model. Okay, so I will take it from the repo. Okay, so yeah, we need to export the model as well. So these are the two things. And here we are running the MCP server here and the web UI here. Okay, so to run the web server, so we take this and then run it. Okay, now the MCP server is running here. Okay, and in the terminal 2, okay, so in the terminal 2, we are going to run from this folder. Okay, src app. Okay, did we go to that one? Yeah, we are in the src app. Okay, so here also we are in the src app. Like now we take the UI and then from here we do that. So it required node version 20.5.1, which I already mentioned in the okay, in the document there. Okay, you need to run this npm install, which I already did. Okay, if you are from front-end developers, so you know already all those things. Okay, so you need to run the npm install to install all the required libraries for the particular package to run. Okay, and then you run this command so that like the UI will come to the picture. Okay. Now we have the UI serving. Okay, before we interact with the browser. Okay, I mean the web UI. We go even through the code and then we'll try to understand what it contains. But we just see the what is the UI contains. Yes, okay, this is the chart window we have. Okay, so I mean this is what like in the real time you see, like there is a browser and there will be some kind of a provision you might see in some websites, like where you can chart with your agents or like some customer agents or something like that. So the very first option we have here, like show available tools. So when I click on show available tools, so it interact with the HTTP server, okay, and then it will try to get the tools available for you to chart with. So it means that you can use any of these tools, okay. So any of these tools to interact and get the information you needed from the database. Okay, I don't ask any question right now, but I will just go to the first code, okay, and then we'll come back and then we'll start asking the questions. Okay, so here like we have the source and then like we have the web UI. I'm not going through this web UI. Okay, so this is again like out of scope. So what this web UI uses exactly like in the previous thing, like slash chart we call, right, in the previous demo, exactly it will do the same thing. Okay, so nothing else, like just call that endpoint and then it will send that message, the question we asked. That's why like I'm not taking anything further here in the UI. But what we are interested about is this MCP. So in this one we have the server, okay, and then we have a client. Okay, so the very first thing, like we have here in the server side. Let's look into the server side. So what we do is like we are again like using the first MCP server here, okay, which is connected to the database. Okay, and then we are defining the tools here. Okay, so okay, we are defining the tools and what the tool do. Okay, we are explaining each tool and what exactly the tool do. Okay, and then the parameters it required. So we define all these tools and then yes, at the end like we are running the MCP server here. Okay, once like the client knows about this tools information, okay, it will call that respective tools. Okay, I mean this one is again like a bit of different than like what we are used in first fast API and APIs and all. So this fast MCP also do the same thing like as a fast API or like other API things, but this has been designed for the MCP things. Okay, so look into this fast MCP packages. Okay, which is purely used for the MCP protocol. Okay, there I just showed the demo like you can use of anything. So I just use the normal procedure there, but here we are using the more like an MCP based package for that purpose. So here we are defining it, what arguments is needed and all. And then so if you look at this DB resources, so there is a DB DB package which we created. So this DB package will depend upon like what thing we are using. Okay, that will be called. For example, if you look at the DB, okay, then we have these total expenses, list countries, find matching customer, invoice by ID. Okay, like that we have created a code inside. Okay, what need to be called. Okay, and then we formulated that information, then sending back to the client. Okay, now the question is that like, okay, how these particular arguments, okay, whatever the arguments like we are talking about will be inserted into this, and then get the required information. Okay, so this is the DB object. Like when you go through the code, like as I said that like, I'm not going through each line by line. What it provides is the methods to get the information needed for that one. Okay. It is also possible that without even writing this SQL statement, okay, without writing this SQL statement, you should be able to even generate this SQL using the LLM model and make a call as well. Okay, use that. Okay, use the previous demo properly, and then this one, okay, for your assignment. Try. Okay, try that. Okay, here I'm giving a specifically what SQL you have to run to get this information. But when you're doing the assignment, you don't even give the SQL. Okay, let prompt will decide what kind of a SQL it has to create. It's a bit complex. Okay, then like then like okay, so you have to really spend time to make it. But it is possible. I mean, if you understand the flow of all those things, you can easily like imagine or like illustrate how it has to be. Okay, so you can have like you don't need like total expenses one call, list countries one call, like that. You can have only one definition, and that definition should able to make the SQLs and get the data, and then formulate that information and send it back. Okay, but here like I want the main point for me is to explaining the tools and the internally like how it works. Okay, that's why like I created a like okay, so I created this particular demo. Okay, so now we have this we have this particular so and then like we are calling respective respective tool. For example, if this is for total expenses, then we are calling the respective tool and then getting that information. Okay, so this is what all about here in the MCP server. Now in the MCP client, okay, here we are using again a normal fast API, okay, for the browser interaction, or like okay, the browser call this particular client with all the required things, and we also providing the list of tools needed for that particular purpose. Though it is not purely following the recommendations of Anthropic, like which we saw there with all the name, title, ID, and all this stuff. Okay, but we providing almost like the similar information so that LLM can understand, but it's not in a standardized format of the tools definition, but it will solve the purpose. Okay. So now like, okay, we have defined the tools here. Okay. And then, we have created like get tools list with the description, get tools params. Okay. Dispatch tool. Okay. What tool to be used, call MCP tool. Okay. Like that we have methods here. Okay. I'm not going through each and every of these functions, but okay. So we have all the required definitions for running this project. Okay, and then like LLM decide tools. Okay, so providing the prompt. Okay, for example, you are an assistant for the Northwind MCP system. You must only use the available tools listed below exactly as named. Do not make any new tools or change tool names. Okay, available tools and their categories are like get tools. Okay, get all the tools. Okay, and then we add that to the prompt. Your task is to decide which tool to call and what parameters to pass based upon the following user query. And this is the user query we are sending to the prompt, LLM prompt, okay, with the query as well. And the response, return your response strictly in JSON format as a list of tools calls. Each item in the list should be one in this form. Okay, so we have provided, okay, what kind of a tool name, okay, what kind of a parameters you have to provide. So we have strictly provided the prompt, LLM prompt, so that, like, we get the response as per our wishes, or like our needs. Only include valid tools and reasonable parameters based upon the query. Do not include explanations or additional text. So I mean, like, it will, as I said, like, you remember, there is a part.text I have given in the previous one. So that contains a very huge information. So I'm just want to drill it down, and I just want only the response, nothing else. Okay, so yeah. Now, once we have that particular prompt, and here we get the question, okay, and here we have all the tools available, okay, and then now we are calling this model, and then, generating a context for that, so that the response will be received, okay, and then the particular response will be send it back, okay, so send it back from the LLM, okay. So, and then there are some other functions to support all, like, some kind of a problems. Okay, I'm not talking about all those kind of a things. We also have another prompt here. Okay, summary prompt. Your helpful assistants convert the following structured data into concise natural language response. Just provide answer only. Okay, this is the data we got from the result. Okay, and then, we are providing, like, all the required information which we received to formulate that, and then returning back that particular thing. And here is the main route we have, which the client, the browser, is calling /chat. Okay, once that one, we are asking the MCP to process our query, and then, it is just doing all the required things and finally sending the answers. And we also have a route with /tools, which provide the list of tools in the browser. If you remember, when we click on available tools, okay, so this is the call it made, and then this is the response it has returned. Okay, so just to show the user, like, what kind of a tools we have. So this is about, like, the project. Now let's go and do the action. Okay, so right, we'll go back to the again our thing, and then, I will try to open the developers tools. Okay, and then here you see, okay, which is for me and Bennett, it is a favorite thing. Okay, so yeah, now if I click on show available tools, you see that we have calling the UI web server with the /tools. So this is what exactly we saw it here, saw it here. So /tools. Okay, so we called this particular endpoint, and then the response what we got it from here is from this one. Okay, that is the one we got. Now let's ask some question. Okay, so I have given some examples as well, like with details of product 51. Okay, get invoice details for order, details of customer name. Okay, list the countries we have available. Okay, total revenue of France. Okay, like that. Okay, order. Okay, what is the total amount for this order? Okay, like that. I have given simple examples here. Okay, we will try one or two, and rest of the things you can try on your own, in case, like, if you are interested, and then when you're going through this particular demo. Okay, so first, now I want to take some product. Okay, some product which is not okay, which is not there in the example. Close all. Okay, so where is our, yeah, this one I will move to some other place. Okay, for example here. Okay, now go to the products, and then, okay, you choose, like, there are around like 77 products. Maybe I will use product number 63. Let me get the product details of product 63, or maybe 57, for example. Okay, product 57 is Revoli and Giro. I don't know what is that one, but I'll ask for the product 57. Okay, so now This is very far away from the database. I'll just put next to the database so that easy for me. Okay. Yeah. Now get me product details of ID 57. Okay. Now you see that it made a call to the chart. Okay. It made a call to the chart. Okay. And then, okay, let's see. Okay. Now we got a response back. Okay. Product 57 is ravioli and 0. Okay. That is exactly what we have here. Okay, so for example, maybe for example, I don't know, I didn't try it. What is the quality per unit for product ID? Okay, what is maybe I don't know, maybe it doesn't respond back with all the details, but I will see. Okay, what it can do. I even didn't try it. Okay, what is quality? What is quality per unit? Per unit for product ID 57. Okay, I don't know whether it will respond or not because like, okay, I didn't look in that angle anytime, but let's see. If it is receives all the product information in the response, I don't even remember. Okay, then like, you know, LLM knows that, okay, yeah, so see that like, okay, so it's just given the same supplied by the supplier 26. Okay, because that is out like, you know, that the information we are sending it. Okay, so, but yeah. Okay, so that is how like, you know, we can interact. Let take like, for example, total revenue for France. Okay, total expenses. Okay, for example, let's take the find customer. Okay, so let's look into the customer. Okay, and then okay, for example, like the customer ID Tom SP. Okay, Tom SP. Okay, so for example, give me details of customer. Okay, some name, for example, Tom's TOMS. Okay, okay, let's see what we get. Okay, the customer is this one located at this place. Okay, and his phone number. Okay, for example, what is the phone number of customer? Okay, maybe like okay, the big cheese, for example, the big spelling CHEESE. Okay, CHESE. Okay, what is the phone number of customer, the big cheese? Let's see. I think it should work. Okay, because I remember that like implemented to answer such kind of a question. Okay, yeah. Okay, so yeah. Okay, give me just phone number of customer. So this I'm telling to the actually I'm telling to the LLM actually, then a server. Okay, so because the LLM will identify this one to which tool to use, it get all the information, but when it is formulating the information, you know, it is giving all the information. But I'm just telling this to the LLM that okay, when you get that information, okay, I mean just go give me only the phone number. Okay, just give me just phone number of customer, the big cheese. Okay. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so that the prompt actually, like the prompt we need to find. Okay, let's find the get invoice details. For example, let's take another one, invoices. Okay. Okay, so there's an invoice. Okay, ship name, and there should be the order ID. For example, let's take one order ID. Okay, 10251. Okay, now ask the question on the order ID. Okay, find the invoice order ID, some number like 10251. Okay, the invoice for this 105. Okay, so it shows that like find the invoice order ID. So it given that it is having the products 22, 57, and 65. Okay, and it also provided the other information as well. Okay, so like that, you know, you can interact with the you know with the database, and then you know call particular things and then process it. Okay, so this is all like we can do. We can also send sub queries multiple information as well, so that it will make a multiple calls as well, which is not what scope of this one, but yeah. So I'm showing that okay, how this MCP is being done. Okay, so yeah, if okay, so if you want this one, so GitHub Marthala, and then you see there is an MCP chatbot. Okay, so you can also okay, so here is that one. So you can take this from Marthala and MCP chatbot. Okay, download it and then you can try this one. Okay, so this is all about this MCP. And if you have some questions, for example, let's try this one, order 10251. Okay, what is total amount for order 10251? Okay, so for example, the total order subtotal is like 26506. Okay, for example, if you look like 10251 order, okay, filter by column 10251 order. Okay, so this is the three items which the order has been made, and then there is an amount. Okay, most probably. Okay, so total, I mean, if you look at like total amount, it should match to the answer like what we got. Okay, so yeah, I mean, like there is some unit price and discount and all this extended price and freight charges. So if you make all the additions and subtractions here, we should be able to get that particular order total from that one by using that okay, the prompt. Okay, so yeah, this is all about okay, so if you have some questions on this one, yeah, this now is the time to ask.
Surendra, what will happen? Like, can you just search for some customer, for example, which is not there in the database? So what will be kind of the LLM response?
Find phone number of, for example, find the phone number of the customer, name Surendra, who is never available there. No customer was found.
Yeah, so it's okay. So at least it is responding meaningfully. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is also based on the prompts, right? So pretty much how the template that we provide, like how we have to respond in case of missing information.
List all products in the order. List all product IDs and name of the product in the order 10251. Let's see. Okay, so it just only provided because like it is not doing the multi-level queries. Okay, so it's just only finding the product. Again, like it has to figure out like IDs. Okay, and then you have to send that back to LLM, and then and then like get that each one and then formulate all the answer. Okay, so yeah.
So you need to have a separate tool definition for that functionality.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So any questions? Is it interesting, the MCP? Thank you very much, and okay, enjoy the Sunday, and okay, spend some time next week to learn about this MCP for more. Okay. Yeah.